take us through the session. We are going, of course, I think, to do introductions first. I'll do quickly mine. Julie Edgar, Dean of the School of currently Computing Engineering and Physical Sciences at the University of Western Scotland. So welcome. Meg, Marla?
Okay, yeah. Lauren, could we start the
We're recording. We are recording.
Yep. Just to remind everyone that we are recording, and the recording of these sessions, the joint sessions, will be available after the event. If you do not want to be part of the recording, or you would rather that you weren't shown, if you turn off your camera, that's fine. If you want to anonymize, take your name from it and just show your university, that's also fine. So this is the first workshop, a shared workshop. All 5 universities will do one each, and we're doing gender and EDI essentials, and it's being presented by myself. I'm the Athena Swan lead, which is the gender balancing charter in the UK, and Marla Baird, who's the EDI consultant and expert at UWS. Next slide, Lauren. So these objectives relate to the entire process, the initiative. But what I really would like to draw your attention to is the fact that we are going to cover theoretical aspects, educational activities, discussions, but we want the entire process to result in a usable action plan, some form of action plan for each partner institution. And we're going to start with that practical applied approach today, because in the discussions, what we want you to relate to us are opportunities and barriers in your particular region, and looking ahead and taking an as-if approach, as if we are discussing this in a year's time. What would have been the barriers to an action plan being introduced, so that we can alert you to some issues before we start. And we hope to create a supportive network for future discussions and activities. Next slide, Lauren. So the shared workshops, just so you're aware, we're doing the gender and EDI essentials today. The next one will be in August, Power and Power Relations with the Institute of Development Studies, then Building Inclusive Behaviours, Allyship and Action Planning. And they will stretch from now until November, and there will be one in each month. Next slide, Lauren. So just to be clear, we have this convention in the UK where we talk about Chatham House rules, and Chatham House was where this originated. But basically it means if you are in a discussion group and you wish to discuss certain aspects, what you say in the discussion group stays in the discussion group. When we leave the discussion groups, we don't relate such and such at this university said that. It stays within the discussion group, so that people can feel that they can be full and frank, and they don't have to be careful about what they said. So please recognise the Chatham House rules, take part in the discussions, but once the discussion is over, please don't relate anything that was said there to anyone outside of it. Next slide, Lauren. So today, as you can see, we're on quite a tight schedule. So we're looking at the background. I'm going to cover some background and the gender and EDI context, and then Marla is moving on to do more specific aspects. We'll have a breakout discussion from 10 to 9 to 10 past, and then you'll have a quick 10-minute break. Back to more, we'll give you some feedback from the discussion, and then some more aspects of UWS, gender and EDI work, another discussion group, and then a final session. And these 3 sessions, numbers 1, 3, and 5, will be made available to you. They will be recorded. Next slide, Lauren. So the objective of this workshops are to look at global, European and Scottish, the context for gender equality, explain the leadership and governance, and provide an overview of equality impact assessments and how those can help you steer towards your action plan and alert you to, they are a very good tool for alerting you to issues that may arise. Next slide, Lauren. So these next few slides, I'm going to cover some aspects of gender and EDI essentials, in a very practical way, because the basis of anything that you do would obviously be research that's already been done. And we're looking for you to realise that no activity within an institution occurs in isolation. What you do in your universities is impacted by what is going on in the external regional environment. And that's very important. It can be politics, it can be economics, it can be legislation. And what we're looking to highlight is the fact that what I'm going to do in the next few slides is illustrative of work that's been already done. And you can see that there are difficulties with gender and equality and diversity and inclusion in each region that I'm going to cover. There are a range of factors that are specific to each region. But what is clear is that gender equality is a worldwide issue and has been for a very long time. Next slide, Lauren. So the first one I'm going to cover is one that relates to the Southeast Asia region, and it's called, the acronym is Sigi, Social Institutions and Gender Index. And the Sigi framework is applied to the Southeast Asia region, and it's based on 4 measures: discrimination in the family, restricted physical integrity, restricted access to productive and financial resources, and restricted civil liberties. What I would like to flag up immediately is that the metric used in Sigi is different. It's the opposite to the European and Scottish index. In this Sigi index, low numbers are good, high numbers mean less positive performances, whereas in the European and Scottish indices, high numbers, high values are positive. And so if we look at, for example, Southeast Asia, we will see that for overall, it rates at 35. And that is in line with with Asia as a whole. West Asia is 44 and South Asia is higher, 48. Can we have the next slide, Lauren? So you can see here, we're looking at Southeast Asia, the world, and the OECD. The OECD is the Organization for Economic and Cooperation Development. That tends to be mostly Europe, Scandinavia, UK, and the US. So you can see that for the OECD countries, the values are lower, which means for these values, we are performing better. However, what that demonstrates is the difficulties in using these frameworks, because you're applying issues and factors and metrics that don't necessarily apply. For example, next slide, Lauren. If you look here, you can see that the Southeast Asian region is 35. But if you look at America, North America, it's 18. And Europe is 17. So what we're looking at there is, it looks as if, in terms of gender equality, Europe and North America are performing particularly well. However, it's because the issues that are raised, for example, discrimination in the family sphere, that is not necessarily the issue in those regions. And what we're looking at is not only legislation to address these things, but the link to the Sigi report is at the end of the slides, but really that we should be looking at not only legislation, but also social norms. For example, one of the things that comes into discrimination in the family sphere is unpaid care and domestic efforts. Now that's termed differently in the other indices that I'm going to refer to, but it is still an issue. Next slide, Lauren. And here is the performance levels for the region. So you can see that it varies. The darker the color, the higher the number. The higher the number, the lower the number, the better the performance. What I would draw your attention to, though, are the areas where there are black and white lines. And that is because there is not a Sigi score there because there's not enough data. And one of the things that I found when I was researching this was in your region, there is quite patchy coverage of data. We in the UK have excellent sources of data. For example, when our students enrol, within 6 months, we have from HESA, the Higher Education Statistics Authority, we can tell what the profile of our students is. We can tell what our comparator universities, what their profile of students is. But what I found in your region is there can be some really interesting data, but then it isn't updated for the longest time. And that can be quite difficult if you are trying to devise an action plan. Universities do not have infinite resources. And so if you were going to design an action plan, you would need to justify why you are targeting this particular group with these particular actions. And if you don't have external data, secondary data, that can be quite difficult. So it's just to flag that up to you in advance. And obviously we will help as much as we can with that. Next slide, Lauren. So this is the European Union Gender Equality Index. And you can see we have time, knowledge, power, money, health, and work. And they're pretty self-explanatory. Work is the number of women who have a degree, tertiary education. Health is how long they have an economic, healthy and active economic background. Money is mean and average income. Power is quite interesting because that's the number of women who are members of parliament, members of the Scottish Parliament, members of boards, that sort of thing. Knowledge is, again, links back to education, but the one at the top is the one that is covered in your discrimination in family sphere, because that's where we look at time spent on caring efforts and unpaid care. And if you look, you can see that actually between 2013 and 2021, that got worse in Europe. And that is easily explained by the fact that by 2021, we had experienced 1 year of lockdown, and it is universally acknowledged that the bulk of homeschooling and care fell to women. And it's starting to have impacts now on women's career progression. So what we're seeing too is between 2013 and 2021, not that much of an impact in 8 years. Again, this indicates that this is a worldwide problem. It's a problem in Europe. It's a problem in other areas, and it's stubborn. It is very difficult to address. It's resistant to change. In fact, in the Sigi report, they specify that they think it will take 3 generations to change. And if I can just quickly explain 3 generations, I did not go to university when I left school because I had to go to work and contribute to the family. But I went to university when I was 28, and by that time I was divorced with 2 children. My 2 children went to university, but they went as mature students. I think I actually put them off. They thought it was too hard watching me work too hard. But they did eventually go to university, and they both have degrees and good jobs. And my granddaughter now, 3rd generation, we are hopeful that after school, she will go directly to university. So 3 generations isn't as long as it sounds, but that's what the estimate is, that it will take time to change. Next slide. And so this is the Scottish Equality Index, and it's the same measures, but we've only done it once. I'm sure you'll be aware that the UK had Brexit in 2016, and although Scotland didn't vote for it, we came out of the European Union. But I think it took us a wee while to realise from this perspective that we could no longer rely on the European measures, and we did our own. It will not be updated again until 2023, so there's no comparison. But what you can see there is that Scotland is performing quite well in most of the measures except power. We don't have as many women MPs, MSPs on boards and funding councils. We have very few principals who are females, for example. So the power aspect is low. But what I would draw your attention to is health, because it looks like we are performing very well in health, but all that means is we do have health problems, but they are not gendered. So what it means is, although health can be a problem in Scotland, it is as equally a problem for males as it is for females. Clearly, as females age, there is the menopause, there's things like osteoporosis. Younger people, it's things like smoking, diet, pregnancy complications, breast cancer, those sort of things. Whereas for men, their life expectancy is lower because of things like cancer, suicide, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension is a big problem in Scotland, high blood pressure. So, but the index looks strong because it is not a gendered issue. We have health support equally for males and females. But most of our structural inequalities in Scotland link back to poverty. So all of those things, health, work, knowledge, time, links back to low income. So if we compare our low income neighbourhoods to the highest income neighbourhoods, there has been inequality there for a very long time. And we have been trying to resolve it in Scotland for almost 50 years. So just to sum up, gender inequality has been a problem for a long time. The women's suffragette movement is recognised as the start of women saying we want to be equal. And that started 125 years ago. Also, gender equality is part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was designed in 1948. And yet, 74 years later, we still have in 2022 a gender pay gap, a significant gender pay gap. So, to leave you with the thoughts, there are issues with gender equality across every region in the world. They may differ, but there are still issues. We have legislation, even in Europe and Scotland, where there is sophisticated legislation, we still have difficulties because one of the things that lag behind are social norms and attitudes, and those have to change too. And change takes time. And it goes slowly, but that doesn't mean we still shouldn't try. The longest journey starts with the first step, and it is beholden on educational establishments to make their best efforts to level up gender inequality. Thank you. Marla?
Thanks for that overview, Meg. So as Meg had said earlier, my name's Marla Baird and I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion consultant at UWS. I've been asked this morning just to give you a bit of an overview of the Scottish context. So I'm not going to go into detail about the Equality Act as such, but just to try and explain the foundation behind some of the policies, processes and structures that we have in UWS, because they come from the Equality Act. And I'm going to use that as a bit of a framework. And I'm aware that this is only one model. You'll have different models, and it is about learning from one another. And I'm really keen to hear how other institutions do things as well. But as I say, this is just one framework. So in Scotland and in the UK, we have the Equality Act that came into force in 2010. Brought together a whole set of different legislation that included race, disability, gender. There was lots of legislation that was brought into under one umbrella. So that sets out the duties that we have within the UK, and we've actually got some specific duties in Scotland that as an institution, a public institution, that we need to use as a framework. Obviously, what we want to do is not only comply with the legislation and the Equality Act, but we also want to make sure that as an institution we go beyond that, and it reflects, and some of the things that we do reflect our values. So we absolutely use it as a basis, but we try to go beyond that. So I'm going to speak a wee bit about the public sector equality duty and what that means, because some of the policies are based in that, and also look at some of the specific duties as a framework. And I'm hoping that you find some of that useful, because obviously some of these things can be translated into other areas, and really keen to see what other things that you do as well. Could you move on to the next slide, please, Lauren? So when I talk about the Equality Act, so Meg spoke there about gender. In the Equality Act, it's sex that's covered, sex and gender reassignment. So just to make that known to you. So sex, when we talk about sex, we're really meaning the biological differences between males and females. Gender reassignment in relation to people who were assigned a particular sex at birth and then go through a transition, and that can be any part on that journey. It doesn't need to be a medical transition, it could just be a social transition, but both are protected. We usually talk about gender because we look at it as a more inclusive term, so that it includes males, females, and different gender identities also. But it's sex and gender reassignment that's covered within the Equality Act, as well as these other protected characteristics. And the reason that I'm drawing your attention to that is when Meg, for example, is looking at gathering statistics and reporting experiences. We know that experiences, for example, if you're female and you're a particular age, that you can actually experience more barriers. If you're a particular race and female, you can experience more barriers, or have a disability. It can make you more vulnerable to things like gender-based violence. So when we're looking at the protected characteristics in relation to gender, we look at that in an intersectional way as well, to try and understand the different experiences that males and females might have. Because when we talk about gender as well, I know that we're concentrating on some of this might be in females today, but we actually look at males as well in relation to how they deal with mental health, and speaking about mental health and things like that. So as looking about the kind of whole scope. So here are the 9 protected characteristics that are covered within the Act, and if you look at this, you'll see that everybody has a protected characteristic. So everybody at some point will be covered by the Equality Act. Can you move to the next slide, Lauren, please? I'd like to say also, if anybody's got any questions that I'm speaking too quickly, aware of my Scottish accent, please ask me to slow down, or feel free to put a question in the chat. So when we look at the Scottish context and the UK context, there are 3 needs or 3 aims of the general equality duty. So these are the 3 aims, and these form the foundation of some of the tools and the processes that we use, because this is what we're trying to do. So we're trying to eliminate unlawful discrimination, harassment and victimisation, and I'll explain a wee bit about what that means, because sometimes we're really clear about what direct discrimination means, but sometimes not the other types of discrimination that are also covered within the Act. And importantly, lots of people concentrate on how to avoid discrimination, but actually the 3 needs of the Act are actually looking at how do we advance equality of opportunity between people of different groups also, and how do we foster good relations. So it's not only about avoiding discrimination and eliminating harassment and victimisation, it's also about how do we actually make this positive, and how do we advance equality for particular groups. And you'll see that I'm going to mention the 3 needs of the general equality duty again, because when we look at equality impact assessment, it's based on the 3 needs of the general equality duty. When we look at the Equality, Diversity and Human Rights Code that we've got in UWS, it's based on this as well. and our structures and what we try and do are based on the 3 needs of the Equality Act. So that was why it was important to draw your attention to the 3 general needs of the Equality Act. If you could move on, please, Lauren. So when we look at, I mentioned there discrimination and the different types of discrimination, and I'm just going to run through these quickly so that you know that it's not just direct discrimination that is covered, that we look at different types of discrimination, and that can be challenging because not everybody in UWS, not everybody in Scotland are going to be aware of the different types of discrimination. So part of my role is to raise awareness of the different types of discrimination or discriminatory behaviour that some people might have. So I'm just going to ask Lauren to kind of run through the slides quite quickly so that we can just look at some of the different types and also some of the other unlawful behaviour. So direct discrimination, really, really clear that someone is treated less favourably than another person because of a protected characteristic. So for example, if a female is not promoted because they're female, that would be direct discrimination. So if a male is picked over a female, for example, when the female has got the skills, the education and the experience, that might be seen as direct discrimination. Can you move on, Lauren, please? More tricky, if you like, is indirect discrimination. So I'm going to mention equality impact assessment a wee bit later, but indirect discrimination means that you might have a policy or a process and make a decision that has got an adverse impact on a particular group. So for example, if we decided in UWS that the only time where information services desk was open was between, I don't know, say between 4 and 5. If we put a policy in that said, here's when students can go and get some information, that would be indirect discrimination in relation to sex, because we've got lots of females who have caring responsibility, and directly that would impact on them because they need to get home. They might need to get home to look after children, and so that might be indirect discrimination. So when we look at policies and processes, we use equality impact assessment to see is there any indirect discrimination that is happening here, and it's a really useful tool to use. Discrimination by association. So for example, if somebody didn't get a promotion or wasn't recruited, or didn't get an experience because they were actually associated with somebody else who had a protected characteristic. So for example, if you felt that because somebody's caring for somebody with a disability, they're not able to take part in this project, that would be discrimination by association. Can you just move on, please, Lauren? Discrimination by perception is where you perceive somebody to have a particular protected characteristic, even if they don't have it. So, for example, previously, not recently, but previously, if somebody had a particular sexual orientation, they might have been seen in a particular light. If you felt somebody had a particular sexual orientation, you decided that they weren't going to get that job or be recruited or promoted, or whatever, that would be, and they didn't have that protected characteristic, it would be discrimination by perception. So it's association, perception, indirect discrimination that are covered under the Act, and I know that can be quite challenging for people to understand. Can you just move on, Lauren? In terms of other unlawful behaviour that is covered within the Act, is harassment and victimisation. So harassment, that covers any unwanted behaviour that relates to a protected characteristic, or it can be things like sexual harassment as well that are covered. But any behaviour that has the purpose or effect of violating a person's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment, would be protected under the Act. And that's where we see, for example, if cases go to court, people might cite harassment, for example, and we're really keen within UWS to make sure that any cases of harassment are reported. At the moment in UWS it's low, but we know in Scotland and in the UK there is under-reporting. So it's not that that things are perfect within UWS. It just means that we need to get better and put different systems and processes in place to make sure that staff and students feel confident and comfortable to report any incidents that could be considered to be harassment, so that they can be investigated and support can be put in place. Victimisation, please, Lauren, the next slide. In relation to victimisation, this is also protected under the Equality Act. So, for example, if somebody raises a complaint about harassment, or somebody supports someone to raise a complaint about harassment, that they are both protected under the Act, so that that person can't be treated any less favourably because they've raised an issue or a complaint. And sometimes that's really, really important, because we've got lots of staff and students who feel that they may not be able to, they don't feel confident to raise a complaint, they don't want to cause trouble, and things like that. So it's really important that they know that they are actually protected under the Act as well. Can you move to the next slide, please, Lauren? So that was just a quick overview of the Equality Act in terms of where we are in Scotland, and I'll return back to the three needs of the general duty when we talk about equality impact assessment and we talk about the structure that's in place within UWS. And as Megan said earlier, it's not perfect. It's a work in progress, and we've got lots of challenges as well. And Meg and I would like to kind of gather some information from you, because obviously it's a two-way process in terms of what are the opportunities within your organisation, and what are the challenges, and how can we work together and learn from one another to see what we can do about sharing good practice, but also looking at how we can address some of the challenges that we both might have. We thought this was a good time just to have a quick break, especially when you've been listening to me about the Equality Act, that we would look at some key barriers and some main opportunities that are in place. So in the next moment, you're going to be put into breakout rooms with a facilitator, and I don't know, Meg, do you want to come in and explain a wee bit more about the breakout rooms?
Before that, Marla, I just wanted to ask if anybody had any questions. I've been having a discussion in the chat with someone asking about the heat map and the colours, and how, you know, referring to another framework that shows that that particular country performs particularly well for gender equality. Now that highlights some of the problems. Like I said, when I looked at the map of the world, America was only 17, which is low and looks like a strong performance, but I suspect that had we applied the European or Scottish criteria and evaluated America in that way, the score would have been very different. So in all of these things, it depends on what you focus on. When you do research of this nature and when you try to design a framework, you have to choose some factors in order to focus on. Those may be the wrong ones, those may be the ones that suit a particular political agenda or a legal agenda, but those are the ones that are chosen. And so if you focus on X, you will get a set of evaluations and you will look at a performance level. Whereas if you looked at something slightly different and, for example, defined gender equality in a different way, you would have a different outcome. So it's not right or wrong, it's apples and oranges, you're measuring different things. I happen to use the Sigi one because I wanted to use the world map to illustrate that it was, in fact, a worldwide problem. So does anyone have any questions before we move? Are there any questions? Okay, so what we're going to do is Lauren has set up randomized groups. We have 10 groups. And what we want you to look at and tell us are what you perceive as the key barriers and opportunities currently in operation in your region. If you want to relate those, for example, to higher education, that would be excellent. If you want them to link them to what is going on in your country generally, that's also fine. So that's what we want you to do. There is what we call a Padlet, and it's like a wee on-screen notebook. And so the facilitators in each group will make a note of barriers and opportunities, and we'll have a look at them and feedback to the group after the session is finished, after you have a comfort break. Okay, Lauren, can we go to the breakout rooms?
Meg?
Basically, in the
Alan, puhi tehdään suinniin.
Hi, Marla, are you there? She's not
Hi.
back.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah, you should be on our way, Meg.
That's
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
That's fine. I'll just wait until everybody's back. Lauren, are you there?
I am Meg, yeah, hi.
Hi, I'm just something coming up that says you have unsaved changes and I don't want to discard. So what do I do? Do I keep working or do I save, or what do I do with my Padlet?
Oh, if you've got the option to save, but I think it should save automatically.
Oh, does it?
I can't.
Okay.
I can't write in Padlet. I'm doing something wrong. I can't write in Padlet.
I think if you double click, Julie, did you double click?
Did I double click? Hang on a minute. Let me bring it back up.
At the bottom right of the screen, there's a little plus icon. And that's where you add a Padlet or add a note. Or
Right,
you can
I'll
double click like Meg said, yeah.
Right,
And then it
I'll
opens up
try
a wee
again.
window. It opens up a wee window, and then that'll have a little button that says publish at the top right.
Oh, I've got
Okay.
the little plus. All right. I've got it. Right, I can write in what we said. Right,
Okay.
thank you.
And Kay, how do we now save all of that? I don't see a save button for all of it. What do we do?
Oh, you mean how do you save the entire Padlet?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think you have to. I think if each person saves their wee note by pressing publish,
Okay.
there's nothing more you need to do. It's all there.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but what I don't know is how you can, like, for example, how can you export that into something that's more
can.
easily
I'll
legible?
Yeah, I'll quickly send an email to Rona because
Mhm.
there is definitely a way to get it on an Excel file.
Ah,
So
okay.
I'll just ask Rona because she's the expert.
Yeah,
Okay,
it
everybody.
should automatically
back?
save.
Meg, I gave everyone in my group 10
Okay,
minutes.
so now we have a comfort break. So if everybody, yeah, that's fine. Everyone come back at 9:20 and we'll start the second session.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you.
Bueno, connection England do na connection bia boy. Ba.
Hello, Lauren, are you there just now?
Hi, it's
Right, Lauren, I've just pinged you a wee message. Did you get it?
I've just seen it. Yeah, I'm really sorry. So there was more people, but I think I don't know if a notification came up for everyone. I tried to move some people around to see if I could get people back into your room, but I'm just reassigning the rooms for session 2 and mixing everyone up
Oh,
again.
that's grand. Thank you.
No problem at all.
Okay, is everybody back? Marla, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. So, Lauren, can we have the next slide? And Marla, just before you start, can I just remind everyone, Lauren was saying, when we get to the end of these slides and we move to the second breakout room, can you please accept the breakout room? And that then takes you into it, but you need to click on that because there were a few people in the last instance who hadn't done that and didn't enter the breakout rooms. Okay. Okay, Marla.
Lauren, would you mind just sharing the Padlet just so that we can give a bit of feedback in relation to the activity?
Sorry, Marla, give me 2 wee seconds.
Thank you.
Is that clear? Can you see that?
Yeah, and this will go out to everyone. So thanks very much to everybody there who took part. It was a really interesting discussion, and I know that we'll still have some things to add to that. I think what was clear was that we share lots of the challenges. It's disappeared from my screen, Lauren. I don't know what's happened. That's it back. We share lots of the challenges, and we had some really interesting discussions about opportunities as well. So feel free to chip in here. But we looked at for example, in relation to opportunities, it was really important that we see role models and representation in leadership positions. So although I think for all of us we recognise that there were not enough there's not enough female leadership, that we all felt we were in a bit of a journey where that was actually it's been increasing. So that was a real positive sign. We also looked at the opportunities for support networks, so women to support one another. And for that to grow. So I think that was really common. I think some of the challenges that are harder and more difficult to change that we all recognise, and that there are lots on here as well that are saying in terms of the traditional role models, the patriarchal society, the traditional roles that are females, the traditional roles that are for males, and really finding that difficult to overcome. So that's going to be a much longer challenge for all of us. So I think that was quite common in general. One of the interesting discussions in the group that I was in, we're looking at other things that were priorities as well. So not just females, but we're looking at disability and social class. And how these things might also impact on experiences. So looking at intersectional identities as well. And we're also looking at things like marriage and civil partnership, where in the UK, some females decide not to change their name, but lots of females still do change their names. So we're looking at the different models. So one of the members of the group that I was in were saying that they don't, that's not common, they don't change their names. So if you've built up, for example, your reputation in research, or your reputation in your career, and then change your name, that some of that could be lost. So we looked at that as well. But again, social class, poverty, and things like that were all mentioned also. I don't know if anybody else would. Yes.
Yeah, and the group we were in, poverty comes in. It's interesting how the manifestation of poverty and how it comes across and the barriers that it presents can vary, but it's there. In the 21st century, we still have issues related to education which emanate from poverty. So it is, and it's always been the case. So it is a difficult thing to address, but we have to look at the opportunities and how we can overcome them. Yeah,
so I think it is that. So I think it's about trying to do things that we've got the power to do, and looking at that kind of practical aspects. So whether it's more development for females or whatever it might be. So a really interesting discussion. So what we'll do is we'll collate some of this, and we'll see, and obviously you can still add to it if you've still got thoughts and you maybe didn't get the opportunity to contribute, so that we can look at the different themes and then look at to share that with you, so that can help inform some of your action plans as well, especially some of the opportunities that are there that might then support and advance equality. Thanks for sharing that, Lauren. I don't know if anyone's got any questions before I move on.
I've not got a question, Marla, but I noticed that there were some comments while the discussions were going on that a couple had said they weren't in a discussion group. Again, if you are participating in the Zoom call, the allocation to the discussion groups is random. So you have been allocated to a group, but you have to accept it. You have to click on that and accept to join the group. Otherwise, it won't happen. So please watch for that when Lauren puts us into the next set of groups.
Thank you. Laura, I don't know if you could go back to the presentation now, thanks. And again, I'm not going to get into this in detail, but it's just to help others kind of understand the framework that we work to in Scotland. And I know that, for example, it's not perfect because you could see in the protected characteristics we don't include social class or poverty, so that's missing, and it does have a real impact, although we've got some of the other protected characteristics. But some of the things that we need to do, and I've provided some links at the end of the presentation so that you can see some of these things, see whether they would help support or inform, or whether you can maybe share some of the things that you're doing within your institution as well. So we've got in Scotland there are specific regulations that we need to work to, and I'm just going to run through some of them. So, and I'll explain what some of the terminologies mean. So we've got to report on how we're mainstreaming the equality duty. So we're talking about the equality duty, we're talking about the 3 needs. So how we're going to eliminate discrimination, how we're going to advance equality, how we're going to foster good relations. And when we talk about mainstreaming, we're meaning how are we building that into all of the processes and structures within the institution. So it's not enough to have a specific target, if you like. You need to make sure that in all of the business that you're doing, the equality, diversity and inclusion is considered, and that you're meeting the 3 needs of the general duty. So we've got to report on what progress we've made in doing that. Every 2 years we've got to report progress, and at the moment that's monitored by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and they look to see whether we are actually then reporting publicly on our website in terms of how we're doing some of these things, so that other people can see it and that we're compliant with the Equality Act. And in terms of mainstreaming, it does just mean how you're going to build that into your institution and all of the processes within your institution. And when I speak later about equality impact assessment, I can explain a wee bit more about how we use that as a tool to help mainstream within the institution. We also publish equality outcomes and report progress every 2 years. So when equality outcomes are specific things that are harder to change. So, and they've got to be aspirational. So for example, we're looking at one of the themes that come up in the breakout groups was looking at senior leadership and female senior leadership. So in the institution in UWS, that's set as an equality outcome that we would then look at females who move, for example, have been promoted from senior lecturer to lecturer. And we're also looking at minority ethnic staff that are going from senior lecturer to lecturer, because we've noticed that there's a bit missing in that pipeline that then feeds into the kind of senior management roles as well. So we've set that as an equality outcome, so that there's a specific activity that's attached to that. That then is published, and then we need to monitor and be accountable for some of the things that we have said that we will do. When we form the equality outcomes, we consult with staff, we consult with students, we look at national evidence, we look at local evidence, and we try as much as we can to tailor the targets or the outcomes so that they're relatable to the problems and the difficulties in the institution. So we're reporting them every 2 years, but we refresh in every 4 years. So we look at, are these equality outcomes the right ones for us at this particular time? Have we solved this problem? Do we need to continue with this equality outcome? Does it need to be, do the actions that underpin it need to be different because we haven't moved it forward? So we look at that, but a lot of the targets are aspirational, and we might never meet them. It might be a longer journey, but we've got lots of activity to try and gender balance programs, for example. But we know that there are lots of activity in that area, but it might take a bit longer than the 4 years. We assess and review policies and practices against the needs of the gender equality duty. So I'll speak a wee bit more about how we do that, but that's when I spoke previously about how we equality impact assess. That's what we do there, but we've got a duty to do that also. And I know that will be similar in your organisation, but we look at employee information. So we look at the staff journey. So we look at in relation to the different protected characteristics that I mentioned, the 9 protected characteristics, who we've recruited, who then was shortlisted for the job, who then was taken on for the job. So we look at that within the institution. We look at who was promoted by protected characteristic. We look at who then was given opportunities to do training and staff development. We look at opportunities, we look at who left the organisation and what are their protected characteristics and why did they leave. We look at who's taken up flexible working policies. So there's a whole kind of range of things that we look at to try and see what that tells us, and ensuring that processes are fair and equal, and there's a level playing field across the board. So that gives us really good information. Now that's not perfect because we rely on staff to tell us what their protected characteristics are. So in the group that I was in previously, we looked at, for example, at disability, and some staff don't feel confident, especially if it's a hidden disability or an invisible disability, declaring that they've got a disability. So we can only analyse as much as the data can tell us. So it's definitely not a perfect system, but we're looking at how can we give staff confidence so that they can tell us they've got a disability, they can tell us if they're a particular religion, they can tell us if they're going through gender reassignment, etc. And how do we give staff confidence to do that? So we look at that information. We also look at the gender pay gap, and there is a gender pay gap within UWS. It's sitting around 14%, so that we still have a gender pay gap. And what we're doing at the moment is we're looking at some of the reasons behind the gender pay gap. So one of the things, for example, that we've found is that in a particular grade, that more males have started in a higher level than females, and looking at some of the reasons behind that. So we know that males, for example, will tend to ask to be put on a higher grade than females. Females tend to kind of accept what they've been offered. So, and we're looking at we're starting salary guidance. So when somebody starts in UWS, we look at things like what salary are they on at the moment, what are their wages at the moment, and are we matching that? And we're aware that we might be perpetuating gender inequality, because if there's already a pay gap in a previous organisation that somebody has worked for, and then we're using that as a measure to put them on a salary scale when they come into UWS, we're actually perpetuating inequality. So one of the things that we're looking at the moment is looking to change the guidance around where we place somebody on that scale, and looking at ways to do that. And we're aware that if we're expecting people to ask for a particular grade, how do we get around that as well if females are less likely to ask? So we are looking at some of that. Some of the other things that we do, so we look at gender pay gap. We also look at the ethnicity pay gap as well, to see in terms of Black and minority ethnic colleagues and white colleagues, and what's the difference between the pay, and is it proportional in each grade. Some of the things that we found, that majority of were Black and minority ethnic staff are in academic roles, but we're looking to see what grade are they on, and what are the reasons if they're getting paid less. But we've actually got a positive gap there. So overall, our Black and minority ethnic staff are actually been paid more. There's a positive pay gap between white and black and minority ethnic staff, but obviously within the different grades that might not be the whole story. So we've got to report on that and publish that information every 2 years. We'll also look at things like equal pay, to make sure that we're looking at disability, we're looking at race and gender, and we're making statements so that we're aware that there's a commitment to equal pay for these protected characteristics. We also look at occupational segregation, so we look at the roles that people do, and that was interesting that that is harder to change, because we look at female roles, traditional female roles, traditional male roles, and that still happens. So in UWS we'll have a lot of the catering staff and cleaning staff that are female, for example, but equally we'll have lots of teaching staff that are female, and we might have senior leadership that might be male. So we're looking at that in terms of occupational segregation. We'll also look at when we're buying goods and services, who we're buying them from. So they then we need to ensure that they then are following the principles of the Equality Act, so that that whoever we're buying goods and services from are reflecting the values of the Equality Act and UWS, and that's important. So whatever that is, and we've got to make sure that we report on that as well. We've got systems and processes in place to do that. You also see that when we publish information, we've got to make sure that it's accessible to everybody. So it should be in clear, plain language, and everything should be accessible. So these are some of the regulations that we work to that help form a structure, if you like, of the work that we do. And I don't know if anybody's got any questions about that before I move on. Okay. Next slide then, Lauren.
Marla, you've got 12 minutes left.
All right. I've already said what Inequality outcome is, so we can move that one on, and I've already said what mainstreaming is, so we can move that one on. And some examples of mainstreaming that you might find interesting is we look at EDI and governance and leadership arrangements. So for example, we make sure there's a gender equality steering group, or Meg's working in one. We also look at in terms of our policies and procedures. So we look at, so we can just give one example. We've got a returners scheme. So if staff are off either long-term sick in relation to a health condition or a disability, or the returner scheme quite often is used by females that have been off in pregnancy and maternity. So they might have been off for maybe 9 months or a year. So the returner scheme gives them an amount of funding or money to get their career back on track. So it provides funding, for example, for maybe a research assistant to support the research to get them back up to speed because they've had that gap in their career. So we look at things like that. So that's mainstreamed within the organisation, if you like. We look at training and development. So we've got a women's leadership and development programme, and again, really important that we've got that support network, but also role models that we can look up to help us progress within our career. But there's a range of different staff networks also, and that's mainstreamed within the organisation. So there is the Women's Hire Network, but there's other networks as well that are really supportive that staff can join. And we look at different events throughout the year. So we've got a calendar that, and we've mainstreamed that throughout the organisation as well to look at different activities and highlight equality across a range of different subjects. Can you just move on, please? So have I got 12 minutes, Meg, to cover equality impact assessment? Yeah, just to keep me to time. Equality impact assessment, I thought would be sorry, 10 minutes. 10, right, okay. Equality impact assessment. I thought would be really useful for us to look at, and I would be quite happy to go into it in a bit more detail in another workshop. So when I mentioned before the 3 needs of the general equality duty, to eliminate discrimination, to advance equality, and to foster good relations, we use that forms the basis of an equality impact assessment. So we look at this decision that we've made, so decisions, policies and processes, this decision that we've made, does it have an adverse impact on any one of the 9 protected characteristics? Does it advance equality for any one of the 9 protected characteristics? Or does it foster good relations between any one of the 9 protected characteristics? And it forms the basis of that. So when you're making decisions, spending lots of money, etc., it gives you a tool to kind of look through that equality lens. It's not meant to be a difficult or onerous task. It's just meant to switch your mindset to say, is this policy that I'm putting in place, what impact might it have on sex or disability or whatever? So it just switches your focus. You don't usually do it on your own, so you're not expected to kind of do it on your own. You're expected to do it with other people, so that they've got the knowledge and expertise, so that people can bring that information together. But we use that within UWS as a tool to help us mainstream. So when we're looking at new policies, significant decisions, significant funding that we're spending, that's where we would do an equality impact assessment to make sure that we're not indirectly discriminating against anybody, and that we are looking at opportunities to advance equality or foster good relations, and we're safeguarding against trying to eliminate discrimination. So we're using it as a tool for that. And what I've done here is I've provided a link to an equality impact assessment page, just so that you can get a look, you can have a look at it. And it's a really straightforward, simple document that you can work through and just use as a tool to make decisions. But we use it in different ways. Can you just move on? Thanks, Lauren. So some of the benefits that we've found, and again, we're in a journey, because some people in some departments will think, what is equality impact assessment? I need a bit of training in that, and that's fine. That's where I would help support them to look at their equality impact assessment. But it does help raise awareness of what the equality issues are. And it means that you've got that evidence base that you can use when you're looking at decisions. And if somebody challenges and said, why did you make that decision, you can go back and say, I made it because it was going to advance equality. And even where it might have a negative impact on a particular protected characteristic, it gives you an opportunity to look at how you can mitigate against that, or how you can objectively justify that. So it gives you that information as well. It means that you're accountable for the decisions that you've made, and that you've made them through that equality lens, if you like. And we're looking at anticipate any risk. So an equality impact assessment is similar to a risk assessment, but you're looking at an equality risk assessment, if you like. So we can look at it in that way, and it can help enhance how we do things in terms of governance and management of equality. And thanks, Lauren. Can you move on? I think I've covered that. If you can just move on that slide. So some of I just thought it'd be useful to share some examples about where we would be expected to do an equality impact assessment. So we look at things called an outcome agreement, where we've got an agreement between us and the Scottish Funding Council, who fund the universities. So we look at we would expect that to be equality impact assessed, so that a whole range of protected characteristics are within that document in terms of what we report back. Some of our strategic plans, so we would make sure that they're equality impact assessed, and we're looking at the strategies and the direction that we're going in. Does it eliminate discrimination? Does it advance equality? Does it foster good relations? So we would equality impact assess that as well, and we would know that. We look at things like our research and excellence framework. That was statutory this time, that we were reporting back in terms of who our researchers were, what their outputs were, that was all equality impact assessed and equality analysed, to make sure that where researchers are all getting the same opportunities, and that we know if there are gaps in any areas, so how many females, how many males, etc. So that's already built in. When we look at the curriculum, our curriculum development plan, we're looking to see how does that help eliminate discrimination and advance equality. So that would be equality impact assessed, and even things like how we develop the estate, how we organise rooms, etc. We would equality impacts assess that, and some of the other things in relation to proposals that go to our committees, we would expect them to be equality impact assessed, so that when you're putting forward a proposal that you've actually considered the equality impact of that, and then when you take that to the kind of senior committee, they're then confident that some of that has been considered, but part of the equality impact assessment will be your discussion with your committee as well, that would then be built into your equality impact assessment. A whole range of things in terms of how we do things. So events that we plan, for example, are they accessible? Are we looking at is there any equality considerations there? So there's a whole range of things that you might do it. But when you look at equality impact assessment, you need to take that approach, because it can actually be anything that impacts the people that you would be expected to equality impact assess, and that wouldn't be possible. So you've got to kind of make a decision about some of the kind of strategic and higher level things that you know are going to have a clear impact, and usually we'd kind of ask yourself, has this got an adverse impact, and that would help guide you. So these are just some of the ways that some of the things that we would equality impact assess within UWS. If you could just move it forward, Lauren.
Marla, we've got 3 minutes left, but I want a wee minute just to explain about the pre-mortem exercise, so that's fine, just to let you know. No problem.
Yeah. Okay, and it's a pre-mortem exercise and then feedback, and then that's, yeah.
Right.
So I probably haven't got the time. I'm just going to skip on from this slide then. If you could just skip on, please, Lauren. So just to tell you, if I've only got 3 minutes, just to tell you a wee bit about, and I can get into more detail and provide a wee bit more detail about this. So as I said, we've got a governance structure. At the top of the governance structure, in relation to equality, we've got an EDI committee. So the EDI committee is chaired by the principal at UWS, and it reports into Senate. So at that very high visible level, we're considering equality, diversity, inclusion, and we feel that that's really important, that that it's chaired by somebody who's really, really senior or at the top of the organisation, so that they've got an oversight of what's happening within the organisation. Sitting within the group, we've got senior allies and champions. So we've got deans and directors of specific departments who are championing a particular protected characteristic. So for example, race, gender, disability, and they're been championed. And again, it's to give that visibility at that higher level, and sponsorship, so that these things have been taken really, really seriously. Might not have time to get into all of this, so
no, Marla, we've got 1 minute in it.
All right.
Lauren, can we skip to the discussion slide? It's this
okay.
one. So just to let you all know what we want you to do now, we're pre-mortem exercise, we act as if. So what we're looking at is, if this was a year from just now, and you'd come up with your action plan and you'd done your best to get it introduced, and we're looking at leadership, gender and EDI actions. A year from just now, you're looking back and you're thinking, that didn't work, or that could have been better, or it could have been a more systematic uptake. And what we want you to think about is what kind of things might be problematic and what would prevent them from being successful. On the basis that if we flag this up to you now, you will be mindful of it. And when you do your action plans, you can factor in any actions that you think will make it be more successful, but this will perhaps alert you to barriers to actual introduction of gender leadership, gender and EDI actions. Okay, Lauren, can we go into breakout rooms now? Okay, so you should have a notice on your screen asking you to join a room. Please click on that. Thanks, Lauren. I'm just having a look at the some of the feedback. Okay, is everybody back? I have some interesting discussions there. Can you hear me? You hear me, Marla? Yeah, some interesting discussions talking about, you know, in certain countries, a realization that women aren't soft and that women are capable. And so there is a policy of appointing women and giving women opportunities. So some really interesting observations there. Marla, anything from yours that was quite interesting?
In our breakout group, there was only two, and then one other person joined. But I think one of the main challenges about why some wouldn't work is looking at that, challenging the kind of cultural expectations of males and females, and trying to impact, and some of that was the kind of key thing. But we also spoke about where we were in our gender equality journey. So and one of the members who fed me back, they were just at the very beginning of their journey, so they'd recognised that there was an issue that needed to be addressed, but they're looking now to see what policies and processes they put in place. So probably a wee bit early for them to kind of think through about what would happen if it didn't work, because they're not quite at that stage yet.
Okay, anybody else want to say feedback, anything that went on and that was discussed? Kay?
Hi there. We had a very interesting conversation. It diverted from the topic, but it was still very interesting. I think for me, that's the context that I said it. It's like trying to identify risk management, do a qualitative risk assessment. And I'm not saying that because I teach risk management, but the concerns that they were raised was about if we put something in place, there is the issue of the person that leads, you know, gets the majority of the workload, which is not, you know, it's good to have a, let's say, diversity champion, but it comes with responsibilities. So it's like Spider-Man, you know, it's like with great power come great responsibilities. So it's like making sure there's the support there. And the other thing that it's kind of things that maybe not be as you would like them, it's the engagement from the staff, because quite often in every organization there is some new initiative that will make things better, and this kind of things, they may be as fad. So it's about leading, having the support to lead and engage the staff from the start. So it's not like we're doing that, it's like, what would you like us to do? So we have a sustainable solution, if that makes sense.
Yep. And Kay, what about yours? Was there anything in yours that was of interest, of note?
Well, I do think so. We actually, I think, ended up talking almost more about success than failure, but some of our participants were noting that some action has already been taken in their countries or in their universities, and they're already starting to see some noticeable differences, some increases in the numbers of female students who are enrolling in their universities, particularly in STEM and ICT, these types of fields, where even now the number of females enrolled is more than the number of males enrolled. So we can see that there is the possibility for success, but the main barrier, the thing that they feel like is still would be making it difficult to make more progress, is still that the mindset. For example, in the rural areas in particular, people may have more traditional views, and that the gender roles are very specific to females, or what they need to do to support the family, to bring money into the family, things like that. That those can be very difficult to break down, especially for young female generations. So the challenge still of widening participation, you could say, to the remote areas.
Still a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Meg,
Okay. Yeah.
interestingly, in my group, well, there was only a couple of us, but there was some really interesting aspects in terms of around priorities and that balancing of priorities when you've got limited resources.
Yeah.
But again, the other aspect was all around the lack of female leadership and the female inspiration and other duties that you're trying to balance. So it was around that priority theme, both as an individual, but also within institutions as well.
Very interesting. Any other facilitators want to add anything?
Shall I come in?
Yep.
We had a really interesting discussion, a kind of three-way discussion, and it was partly about a lack of policies and a lack of planning to do this, but partly also about having a powerful female rector who could empower other women beneath her to make decisions, and some recognition that women need additional support, whether it's with childcare or with upgrading their qualifications and things like that. But at the same time, also a wider recognition that the broader community and the broader ethos needs to be addressed. So it's not just the university, it's kind of the public and how people think about these issues. And similar questions to Julia's group, questions about resources, about infrastructure, and how you manage this.
Interesting. Anybody else, any other facilitators want to add anything? Fiona?
Thanks, Meg. So our group was really focused on the commitment. So if, to be able to embed change, to be able to embed a reflection, then it needs to obviously be commitment from the university, from the institution. Also, you could, in a year, you could timetable training workshops, you could timetable workshops, but then it's about how do we assess that culture change? How do we assess that things are moving in the right direction? And one proposal would be maybe to create an action plan with some milestones that also reach beyond 1 year, so that enables a sustainable enthusiasm for this project as well. Thanks.
That's a good suggestion. We can take that on board. And particularly Hannah isn't here from Aston University, but she is going to do the shared action plan session. So we can mention that we want different horizons, strategic, tactical and operational horizons for the action plan. And that would bring in exactly what you were saying, Fiona. Anybody else, any other facilitators want to add anything? Okay, so I had left a few slides at the end, which are on monitoring and evaluation. Those are just for interest. You can have a look at those. If anybody has any questions, please get back to me. If anybody has any questions generally after this session, please get in touch with me. You've all had several emails from me, so you know my email address. Just get back in touch, and if I can't answer, I'll pass it on to somebody within UWS who can. Julie, do you want to finish up and just say goodbye to Marla? Julie, do you get anything to say before we go?
I was just going to thank everybody for attending today and being able to stay with us for the period that we've been online. It's been absolutely fascinating, and it's worked because of your input, and particularly in the discussions. And I don't know about anybody else, but those 20 minutes flew by when we were in the discussion groups, and you're just really getting into things when we're coming back into the main workshops. But it wouldn't have been a success this morning without your input. So a huge thank you to all of the attendees for our breakout group leads, but yourselves particularly for participating. And thank you, Meg and Marla, for the presentation. Very, very inspiring and very informative. Thank you very much.
Okay, and can we just also thank Lauren for all of our organisation? It wouldn't have been a success without us, so thanks very much. Okay then, if there's any questions, please get in touch, and I'll circulate a link for the recording. I'll circulate a link to the Padlet when I've done a thematic analysis, and we can hope to see you all at some point in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
See you next month.
Yeah. Chào bạn.